virtual. I think it's a great opportunity to share what we're doing, and especially because we are talking to a community that is always left behind in policy and other stuff. My team work with migrant farm workers, immigrant workers here in Virginia. So I want to introduce a little bit about what are the conditions they are living here in Virginia. So basically, first, who are the agricultural workers in Virginia? So mostly are Black, indigenous people of colors, are calling domestic workers.
Manuel, you're not screen sharing right now. Oh, maybe that's because I pinned you. I will unpin and see if you can screen share now.
Maybe, yeah, maybe I was not. Let me now.
Much better.
Yeah. So, the agricultural workers in Virginia, so we call it domestic or local workers, are migrant workers that live here in the U.S. Or in Virginia, and they're part of this circuit that are starting in Florida, North Carolina, Georgia, Virginia, Delaware. They're doing this circuit in the harvesting of produce or other stuff. Part of these workers are undocumented workers. That these people, we can say, is around 48% of the labor worker in Virginia. The next category is we call it the H2A or guest workers that mostly come from Mexico, but we also receive folks from actually in the apple picking. We have some workers from Jamaica. There are some other people from Central America, and we receive some people too from South Africa. So this visa program allow farmers and companies to bring workers because they say they have not enough U.S. workers to have this position. So they bring these workers with this visa to the U.S. So another question is like, well, this worker, why is not enough U.S. workers getting these positions? No, and basically it's because the wages. No, most of the workers get paid by production, but they have a minimum guarantee that actually is more than the minimum wage right now. For last year it was $13.15. This year is $14.16 per hour. That but it's an issue here is like only 3/4 of this contract is guaranteed. And most of this contract, the people came, you assume there was 40 hours. But most of the contracts, they say 30, 35 hours a week. So that's the guarantee they have for the work. But most of the workers also have a piece rate or pay by production. By example, as you see in those pictures, the tomato pickers get paid by bucket. So a bucket like that is around 68 to 70 cents. Per bucket. But we also saw that undocumented workers are getting paid by hour sometimes. Sadly, something like we're fighting for years and years. We fight last year, not this year. It's like farm workers are exempt for the minimum wage. Exempt also for the increase that they have. So, and this 14.16 for this year for H2A doesn't apply to this worker. So undocumented worker or a local worker, US citizen worker, can be paid less than $11 per hour. That is the minimum wage in Virginia, and that is legal. Sadly, but legal. So as you know, Virginia, different, the agricultural is a big industry in Virginia. We can also here in this map, how it's like the distribution is very like in around the Commonwealth. We can see like in this area, the Eastern Shore are basically the tomato production will be around here, also potato. We saw on the south side of Virginia is tobacco country. This area is have hundreds and hundreds of farmers and workers that came for. I know workers that coming for 30 years to harvest the tobacco and work on the tobacco. In the southwest area, we saw a lot of some produce and Christmas tree or pine tree production. We say Central Virginia and the Shenandoah Valley as the orchards, as the most workers. And also we can see in this area wineries that are the main industries around. And so around Richmond, you can see around the northern neck, a lot of produce like vegetables. They are the main industry, and they have bring workers to work in that area. But one of the stuff that we always get complaints, we get to we witness that too, because when to do the visiting the labor camps is like the conditions of the housing, the labor camps. Sadly, you saw those conditions and just like, wow, this is. I remember one of my first visits, like, this is illegal. This is outrageous for sure. I was almost like putting a report when I met with the attorneys, and they said, well, sadly, that's legal. This is like the conditions for the camps are the minimum that's all legal, no? But we say like, because in the paper says it's legal, I mean that's fair. So this is the basic stuff. They need to have a house. It's a bed for each person, hot cold running water, heat available when it's cold outside. But during the winter, that's amazing. But what happened in the summer when it's 100 to 105 degrees for more than a week? It's no need for AC. It's not in the regulations. There need to be no sign of infestation for rodent or pests, insects. There need to be a clean kitchen area, trash cans, place to wash or dry clothes, but that's not mandatory. You can be, could be like a bucket, or could be, they can take you to the laundry. The sanitary bathrooms. But sanitary bathrooms means like a nice bathroom inside the house. Actually, no, it's not necessary. It could be a portable bathroom, and that could be outside the house. And the rule is like they need to be clean, or like dispose all the waste at least once a week. So imagine you living in Southside Virginia during the summer, sharing this portable bathroom with other 8 people or 10 people in 100 degrees. It's like going to a concert in the summer every day. And that's completely legal. One is of they need to be separate toilets for men and women. Sorry, not for 10 people, it's 15 people. So you need to, the minimum is you can share the toilet with 15 people, and that's legal. There need to be at least 1 shower for every 10 people. But there are some regulations that allow all the camps to be for 15 people. The stoves need to be 2 burners for every 10 people or 2 families. And the 1 refrigerator too for like 10 people. So these conditions are like you can say that's not fair to have that. You can see some examples of camps we visit. These are the bathrooms. These are condition of the house. These are like they're falling apart. This is the fridge. They're like a ventilation minimum. They're very bad condition. You can see in this camp they had a portable bathroom for this camp. There was like 60 people. But the other example is like sometimes is these camps, and that's a problem we have is like they are remote areas, no? And those workers are isolated for their so many stuff, no? Like in this camp, the housing is around here, it's just the top of the mountain. So there are no way they can go to somewhere walking to another store to buy something they want, or like to go and whatever they want to do. So all the workers are coming to work 24/7 practically and living there isolated. They only go one day out for the laundry or cash check and buy groceries and go back. So it's difficult for them because they're missing the family, they're missing the human contact, not to. And sometimes you saw these camps, they're like the access is impossible because they are closed. So no churches, no us can visit. It's more complicated for us to reach them. This is like another condition of housing in Southside in the area of tobacco. Look at this house. It's like I remember when I visited this house and this like falling apart when you working inside. It's dark. There were like so many people like living there, and like again a portable bathroom for like 10 people to share. Thus, this is another conditions in Southwest Virginia. It's very cold. We usually saw that they have no heat. In this like the house is falling apart. They have like a water filtration for sure. And in the example here, these people are living in the living room. It's no privacy. So you can see that this is in the northern neck. And the difference between these camps are like the H2A, the housing is provided by the employer and not cost. It's mandatory. The H2B, this housing, the H2B are workers that came with a work visa by small agriculture. And these people are paying for the housing. So the employer pay charge a rent for the housing. But sometimes we saw that there are 20 people living in one apartment or one house that enough space. So we saw that. So that's part of the condition on the camps. But I want to also talk about what we're doing extra to looking for the housing condition. Lajc is visiting farm workers around Virginia all year round and talk about the rights they have regarding to the only housing, the discrimination they can suffer, wage theft, all the conditions they have at the workplace. So we visit camps in the Eastern Shore area and Central Virginia in the summer when there's like a lot of people coming to the harvest of tomatoes and apples. We do outreach in the Southwest Virginia area with the pine tree workers around the fall and winter when like they came to cut the trees that give you joy for the Christmas for some people, make the wreath you hang in your door. It was crazy because I asked him how much a worker they get paid by piece wreath, and it's like $1 something, or even $2 per wreath. They need to make a lot. But also after the winter, there's not so much workers in the area, so we advocate in the General Assembly for better conditions for farm workers around here in Richmond to pass some legislation to support better the farm workers. After that, around the spring and before the summer, we're visiting a lot of H2B workers, especially in the Northern Neck area, that work in the mostly like oyster. There's a lot of oyster shuckers, crab, seafood processors. So we're visiting in that area. So we are busy all year around. We used to say we have a slow season, but right now with so many H2A workers and H2B workers coming all year round, we are always like busy. But the most important one, if you have any question, feel free to in the chat, but also you can contact us in our social media. We have Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Very important is to know somebody that is working on the fields, working as a farm worker, H2A worker too. You can pass or contact. We have a hotline that is free or charged. We say 1-800-269-4717. But also we have a WhatsApp. You can text us or send a voice note, 434-242-1494. We have outreach. We have attorneys that all are bilingual, Spanish and English. You can communicate with us do it that way. So that's part of my presentation. I'm open for any question that you can have.
Any questions, thoughts? Yeah, you guys do a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot. Yeah, but the issue is like we are the only organization that are helping farm workers. There are other organizations like Central Virginia Legal Aid, but they only can help H2A workers or workers that have legal residence here in the US. So that will be getting out 48% of the workers and also all the H2B workers because they can represent those. So it's a bunch of people that, and also it's like a bilingual. So it's difficult sometimes to find legal representation that speak your language too.
Right, absolutely. And I know you mentioned, oh man, I'm going to ask questions. I saw Sally, you raised your hand. If you would like, I can allow you to speak if you want to share a question. Actually, I'll do that. Oh, wrong person. Hey, Sally, did you want to ask a question?
No, I apologize. I hit that by mistake. Sorry about that.
No worries at all. We do have a question in the chat. Children working without parental permission. Yes, I am going to touch on that. Don't worry. Hang on, I'm going to pin myself because for whatever reason, Zoom doesn't like my voice and won't spotlight me. So I have to do it myself. So yeah, there is a lot to be said about what Manuel is doing and what Legal Aid Justice Center is doing. And I'm very, very grateful for the work that they do in their collaboration on this. I want to say one more thing about LAJC before I get into one of the bills we're advocating for this year, which is, Manuel, you mentioned that you support workers independent of immigration status and independent of language of origin. But what does it look like for folks who don't have immigration status? Like folks might come with an H-2A or an H-2B visa, and we saw the housing conditions for them. But what about somebody who might be here undocumented? Do they still have, what are conditions like for them?
I think that sometimes they're more vulnerable in some aspect. So there are people that are like a GRC, they're coming for like we saw a lot of these people coming for like a small communities or indigenous communities that sometimes like I know even Spanish is the language they can communicate. So they are living in this circuit that traveling all around and they have no I think that's difficult for them is like they don't have connection with the community, and they don't have community. The community is the co-workers and the employers because they're traveling all around. But sometimes they are they have a voice, or when they're injustice, they are more willing sometimes to speak up because they say, well, I have nothing to lose. Instead of the people that have H2A, they say, well, if maybe I talk or I complain about something, I will lose my visa. And that's a lot of stuff. That's big deal for a lot of people. So it's a situation that is difficult for a lot of the workers. We are very clear with them, like it doesn't matter the status they have rights because they are human beings. And they deserve and they have the right to be treated with respect, to get paid what they owe, to be like living in conditions for like a human.
Thank you. Well, I'll just take over. There is much more to say and much more to talk about. Wait, we have another question in the Q&A. Let me take a look at that. How does Lajc get their funding? I know you're a nonprofit. Do you wanna handle that one?
Yeah, actually, because so actually it was in the 80s or beginning of the 90s. We have because we're part of legal services, but when the 80s decided that legal services can serve undocumented people a lot of restriction, we like a split. We are our own independent organization, and we receive funding like for private donors, also we have grants. By example, part of the work I'm doing, we not only do outreach for farm workers to come out their rights, we do some trainings about safety and health in the workplace. So we receive funding from OSHA to do that. Part of talking about waste theft and conditions and rights they have the workers, we receive funding from a law that it's like the Victim of Crime Act. So we receive funds for that grant. And we have private donors, people that are direct to put money directed to Lajc, or sometimes they want direct to the program, to the project, they want donate to specifically for the farm worker program. So we have that, and that's why we have that liberty to do more. Not so many restrictions to do our work.
Thank you. Yeah, so I'm going to talk a little bit about two different things. First, because it already came up in the questions, I'll talk about one bill that we are supporting in this year's General Assembly. It is a bill proposed by Delegate Lopez that's been proposed in the past and somehow hasn't passed, which would require children to get parental permission in order to work on tobacco farms. This is the lowest possible bar, my friends, in my opinion. I feel like it's true that you must be 18 or older to buy tobacco products, but there is no age limit for working in tobacco fields. And in fact, nicotine poisoning is very common in tobacco fields because wet tobacco plants release nicotine. The nicotine is conveyed through like the dew in the morning or rain. And so kids get nicotine poisoning from working in tobacco fields. Some of the major tobacco companies have made a public commitment not to allow children under 16 to work in their farms. However, 16 and 17-year-olds are still children, and therefore they deserve the same level of protection. This bill, now we understand that a lot of folks who are families that have children working in tobacco fields are low income and might not have a lot of other priorities, but this would require parental permission, which allows for parents to say, oh, maybe don't work on that farm, maybe work in a different area, or at least the informed consent piece is there. It's also true that we need more and greater protections, but this is one safeguard that we can put in, ought to have already put in place. So that bill is HB, I got rid of it, of course I did. I believe it's HB, I can't minimize the meeting because I am the host, of course I can't. Apologies. HB 876 is the bill number, HB 876 by Delegate Lopez. And I am putting that in the chat as well. There is a fact sheet that is part of your participate packet that can tell you more details about that. We're also pushing for other bills. We will continue to support farm workers and the immigrant community, no matter what comes before the General Assembly this year. So there is a bill that unfortunately is already not going to go anywhere, that would have required some further regulation on H-2B housing, and we will be following in case there are bills that limit worker protections, and we would oppose them as the Virginia Interfaith Center. So keep an eye out on the action alerts. We know that those are important. I'll talk just for the fun of it. This bill, HB 876, it's easy. It's just counting down. I just can't remember it. HB 876 will likely be referred to the Agriculture Committee, which has a new chair because the House switched party alignments. But the new chair of the Agricultural Committee is Delegate Lee Ware, who has been a collaborator with the VICPP sometimes in the past. He, last time this bill came before him, voted in favor of requiring this parental permission for children to work on tobacco fields. So this bill has a decent chance of passing, and we have high hopes that it can go and protect workers. That's the bill piece. Again, there's a fact sheet in your participant packet. I highly recommend checking it out. I wrote half of it. Another thing I want to talk about is that not all change comes from the law. Sometimes change comes structurally, and advocacy is one important way to work for justice, but another important way to work for justice is organizing. I used to be in Charlottesville and was on the board with Impact, which is a community organizing group out there. I know some of you are from Northern Virginia and are familiar with Voice, which does similar work. But organizing as a broad strokes is just a group of people getting together, addressing problems that affect them with the people who can control those problems. And so some of you might have heard of United Farm Workers, which is a union of farm workers from California, rather famous for their boycotts in the 80s. And they are one union that uses community organizing to gain real change and to gain rights for farm workers. There is another phenomenal union called FLOC, the Farm Labor Organizing Committee, FLOC, and they are based in both Ohio and North Carolina. However, big news, FLOC is looking to is expanding into Virginia, and just this past year hired an organizer in Virginia. So FLOC is working with farm workers on the ground to talk about what's important to you and how can we work together toward change. This is mostly happening on the south side of Virginia, where the tobacco fields are. And some of the photos Manuel showed of migrant worker housing were from that area right now, but it could expand. The connections are mostly with tobacco farm workers in North Carolina, and therefore that's the crossover. It's people, corruption doesn't stop at state lines, and therefore it's important to have organizing happening both north and south of the state border. So in Virginia, they are trying to get the farm workers, they're having conversations with farm workers and trying to get farm workers organized. But an important piece of that is not just to have the farm workers on board, but also to have broad-based community support. And so as a faith community, we can really show solidarity with Flock and with other farm workers who are organizing by supporting them, by being aware, by following them on social media, and jumping on the bandwagon when we are called to action. Sometimes that means boycotts or not buying at certain stores. Other times it means meeting with your legislator or meeting with company officials. Just a month or two ago, Flock had a meeting with Reynolds Tobacco, British American Tobacco, whose subsidiary is Reynolds, to talk about requiring more protections for workers in the tobacco fields. And there were faith leaders from all around on that call, including people whose names I can't remember. Clayton Signet of the Catholic Worker Network and Reverend Barber of the Moral Majority, and just a lot of faith leaders. So voices of faith really can make a difference in the organizing field with companies, with local governments, and with decision makers, whether they be de jure or de facto, legal or simply by matter of course. So we were hoping to have an organizer from Flock on today, and unfortunately that was not able to happen. But I just can't emphasize enough how important it is in organizing work to have community support, and how the faith community really lends a moral voice and credence to that issue as a whole. Questions about organizing or about legislation that's on the table right now? Okay. Well, are there other questions about protecting farm workers and steps that might be taken, or things that you'd like to ask either myself or Manuel, VICPP or Lajc? I'm going to go ahead and share the Flock website in the chat as well.
Sheila, I want to say something important with the faith community is like they had opportunity. So there are some ministries that are going to visit workers, and it's important to, we're always open to do some trainings at the church to like know a little bit more about how to identify problems and talk about issues in the camps, because I think it's a great opportunity to do the job. You can talk to services over there, but like it's important, like if you saw something like you think it's not okay, how you can approach and how you can maybe like give us a call, like, hey, I meet this worker in this camp, or I meet this worker in this store, and this is happening, or this worker came to my church. Like it's important to so we can connect. So we're always open to do some training with the community, how to be a good ally for the farm workers. So feel free to reach us for all if you have that idea for your community.
Yes, absolutely. That reality of see something, say something is really important. Human rights are human rights. And so getting to know the people around you, especially the overlooked professions around you, is really helpful and important as we move toward a more just society. There was a question in the chat that the short answer is yes, but I think it's worth expounding on a bit more. Lynn asked if she understood that legal US citizen farm workers are not covered by the same minimum wage laws as H-2B visa holders.
That's right. So farm workers, doesn't matter the national origin or legal status they have, they are not covered by the minimum wage. So when the minimum wage increased in Virginia to 11 this year, they are not covered by that. because they're not H2B or H2, well, they're not H2A workers, and agricultural, they are not entitled to that hour. There's a reverse wage rate that this year is 14.16. So yes, they are not covered by that. So that's something like we oppose that exemption that is no, the root is racism, because when you saw that was a federal law, and the basic one congressperson say was like because by the time the 40s and 50 was more African Americans working on the fields. I wouldn't say the exact word, but say the African Americans are not the same as the white men, so that's the way they're not entitled to have the same wage. So they're not entitled to a minimum wage. So that's something that came for years and years. It's based on racism because it's not other. Most of when they're fighting this law, like I remember last year, they said they will affect small farmers. They will affect a lot of. They will put in jeopardy farmers, and that's not true because we have some survey. There was some data that say like small farmers actually pay more than minimum wage, because they want to maintain their work, and the others say, well, we already pay more than minimum wage because pay by reproduction. Amazing. So where is the problem to put that on paper? That's a minimum, to come less than a minimum. That I have no something to say about that. Is this something like, yeah, if you pay more, amazing, great. Why don't put that on paper? So what is the problem?
Yeah, it's the eternal question of why don't we write it down so that no one can take advantage of workers like that anymore. And you hit excellently on the points about how the exemption from minimum wage is deeply racist and problematic, and that is something we will be continuing to advocate for in future years. Sadly, there's not a bill this year, but we will keep pushing to get farm workers covered by minimum wage. Any other questions, feedback, thoughts? Okay. I think it's also something again worth chatting about, which is how can you all get involved? So I mentioned, supporting those who are organizing. Manuel mentioned just being aware of the issues in your area. And I see some of my regulars who are already very involved in migrant ministry, but truly getting to know farm workers and migrant workers in your area, building those relationships. Because as Manuel mentioned, like folks tend to be extremely isolated. They might get one trip to the grocery store, the laundromat, and the bank once a week, and that's it. And they may not speak the language, and it's tough to be that isolated. There is also a question about recent legislation passed in Virginia. Have we been champions or supporters of things in the past? Well, yes, last year we were hoping to get rid of that exemption on minimum wage, and it passed the House and died in the Senate. We did get rid of the exemption from minimum wage for domestic workers. So that's something, which is the other major racist exemption, because in the South, the people who were working on the fields and cleaning the houses as maids in the 1930s, when this minimum wage law was passed, were majority Black, and Southerners did not want to pay them minimum wage. So many of those exemptions have been gotten rid of thanks to the advocacy of organizations like Lajc and VICPP. That has been a big one that we've worked on. Sadly, farm workers are still exempt from the minimum wage in Virginia. What other legislation to protect farm workers has been around the last couple of years, Manuel?
We have one Well, I think as a champion, the like award that help us with the minimum wage exemption. We have in the Senate, Senator Ghazala Hashmi support us with a legislation to because all the stuff like I was incredible, not aware. I was like, this is of course is something. It's the right a break. You don't have a right to a break. You can work 22 hours. If you can, it's not right to a break for go to eat nothing. It's not legal mandatory. So we were asking in the beginning is a break, especially for the heat stress. Was like a heat stress bill to require after when it's more than 80 degrees, require a break, 15 minutes after 4 hours, so many conditions, water and other stuff. Sadly, so we were introduced this twice, but the government, the Virginia government say like, well, we have the safety and health board is working on that. There's no need to legislate because the board will pass that. Sadly, this December they killed that. So it was no time to put this year. So that was sadly, but that minimum wage, break, his stress, in order for housing conditions for the H2B workers, like a registry, because we don't know where the H2B workers are. So most of the bills they introduced in the past years.
Yeah. Sadly, I mean, last year with the pandemic, we heard a lot of talk about essential workers, and farm workers are the most essential workers. We can't have food without them. However, they are truly not treated as essential. And we can talk about all day about how the racist past of these exemptions, but the truth is there's a racist present as well. I mean, as we mentioned, almost half, not quite half of workers are undocumented. About 20% are on temporary visas, and the other 30% are people who have work authorization or are citizens, but are still left out of the conversation in part by association with less desirable groups. Talking to friends who've worked on farm, nobody wants to spend 14 hours a day outside in the hot sun doing this backbreaking labor. You do it if you have no other choice. And, people still take pride in their work, and that's good and excellent. But we ought to be respecting this work much more than we are.
So Robbie have a question about the example of successful resolution. I think one big deal we have was the COVID standards we passed in 2020. Was part of Lajc, VICPP was part of the coalition among with workers in the fields and the poultry industry, and we passed these COVID protections mandatory in Virginia. That was only like the big deal was like was the first in the nation. So Virginia was the first state in the United States to protect, they have mandatory regulations to protect workers. There was an example for a lot of other states, and actually for other countries, we're still called like how we did it and all the stuff. But sadly, actually on Saturday, the new administration signed executive order, and one of the stuff, they want to get rid of these worker protections. Soon, the Healthy and Safety Board, they will having a meeting to discuss to get rid of these protections. So I think it's very important. For sure, they will hear from us, and I will contact you, Sheila, and you, the members of the VICPP, because this is important that we stand in support of these regulations, because these regulations save a lot of people, and they're in place. They are so what is the problem to have this regulation? To take it is will cause more harm that burden that they're saying.
Yeah, absolutely. That is something we were excited about, and it looks like an axe is hanging over it right now. I noticed the question of which companies or lobbying groups oppose farm worker protection legislation in Virginia. Sadly, one of the biggest opposition groups is the Farm Bureau, and enormous farms tend to be the other big opposition we face. The Farm Bureau says they're advocating on behalf of small farmers, but functionally most of their funding and most of their members are large farms that have a lot of income, that can afford to pay lobbyists, and that don't want to see things like rest breaks in the heat or minimum wage for farm workers cutting into their profits. Unfortunately, this is something that we've struggled with, and we're trying to do the inroads that we can, and we know good farmers. We have, in fact, a lot of farmers who've given testimony and said, yes, we should pay our employees minimum wage, and yes, we should have heat safety protections, and yes, we respect our workers, and we give them these protections already, and we want to see that enshrined in law. But the Farm Bureau as a whole has been, unfortunately, just does not want to see any additional regulation because it would cut into profits for farmers.
Yeah, and it's like not true. Like you say, the profits will be cut because at the end, this represent more big business.
Yeah.
And I think another lobby group that always oppose to any pro-worker bill or farm worker is a small business association that will very opposed to any of this. News is like the state director of this organization is now the deputy director of the Labor and Commerce of the Commonwealth of Virginia. So I think will be 4 years very hard to fight for workers' rights in the Commonwealth.
Awesome. Well, we can keep blabbering on and telling you stories, but I think I might let you all go a little early. I have a video on farm workers being essential workers, but I think you all know that drill. Happy to show it. And if you want to stay, you are welcome. And if you want to head out, grab yourself a snack before our 3 p.m. breakouts, that'll be fine. Thanks again for being here. And thank you to Manuel for stepping on and being a part of this conversation on protecting farm workers.
Thank you for the invitation, and thank you for all the time the VICPP members are always willing to send emails, letters, and going from somebody to protest and to defend farm workers. Thank you.
People power is the best power. Thanks. I'm going to pull up that video and share it in just a moment. Apologies. All right, I'm going to share my screen for those who are still here.
Trabajo en la área de Fresno, piscando naranjas, olivos, de limones, toronjas, de todo, por 45 años. El coronavirus, hasta ahorita a mi persona no le ha afectado, pero de todos modos traemos un temor.
Don't forget the people that are feeding us. They're not only feeding the nation, but they're also feeding the rest of the frontline workers that are out there, like our nurses and our doctors and our firefighters and our police. We've seen on the media people applauding for our nurses and our doctors, and God knows that they deserve that applause because they're our firefighters, our policemen. But again, when we think about those frontline defenders of our, of our society, that we have to remember that the farm workers are part of that group.
California has an estimated 420,000 farm workers. They are among the state government's essential workers during the coronavirus crisis, but many lack proper documentation and health insurance and are ineligible for unemployment insurance. So they're in a vulnerable position.
Todos estamos con una preocupación porque todos tenemos biles, todos tenemos que pagar. Todo.
Sí teme uno de contagiarse, pero pues a la misma vez tiene uno que salir a trabajar de todas maneras, porque pues tiene uno familia y pues tenemos que salir a buscar el pan de cada día.
Tengo precauciones, ¿no? Donde me meto, donde haga menos gente, donde haga menos peligro del virus.
The Latino culture is a very friendly culture where people shake hands and people hug and things of this nature. And that's kind of contrary to our nature. But I think that those are things that people just do have to learn. And when they're out there in the fields, that has to be enforced by the foreman or the people that are in charge of the crews.
Una gota de saliva puede contener cientos de virus. Una sola gota. Así que, ¿qué podemos hacer aquí en el trabajo para prevenir o reducir la transmisión del coronavirus?
Mi jefe me encarga que siempre me lave mis manos.
Ya no estaban queriendo que llevara uno más de 4 o 5 personas en el carro porque va uno pues muy como apretado. Ya hasta en eso estaban poniendo restricción de que no querían ver tanto personal en un solo auto.
Farm workers in California earn about $26,000 a year. And with school closures, many now have to worry about finding childcare and providing breakfast and lunch for children stuck at home.
Las tiendas grandes temprano es cuando surten las cosas y pues cuando uno no está en casa. Ya cuando llega uno ya nomás a ver qué alcanzamos.
Que Dios nos dé licencia de que pase rápido porque si no va a haber una crisis muy grande aquí en toda la nación, todo el valle de Fresno.
Farm workers have to be included as part of our safety net. In fact, you might say that they are the base of the safety net because without them, without the food, then nothing can go on.
Well, again, thank you all so much for participating. I really appreciate you, and have a great rest of the day. I look forward to seeing some of you at the 3 o'clock session. And tomorrow, remember, we've got our meetings with delegates and senators. So make sure to tune in for that. Have a good afternoon all. Bye-bye.